Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
A crowd like this here, I'm looking forward to a really neat discussion. And a thank you to everyone who is tuning in all over the world. I know, Debbie, you told us that you are listening, and we look forward to hearing from you during the program. And thank you to Amnon Nissan of Nissan Communications for live streaming this all over the world. If you have a question, let us know in the chat box, and we'll feature it as part of the program. Today's January 31st, 2017, the 4th of Shvat. Our topic, a hardened heart. And Liz, you asked this last Shabbat, how do we make sense out of Pharaoh's hardened heart? We have a whole class on that today. Yay. And what I like about today's class is not only will it discuss a important story in the Torah, a theological problem, but I think we'll also end up with some lessons in our own lives today. Let's make sure we have place for everyone around the table.
Okay. Jump me on the spot.
So the name of the Torah portion is Bo. Bo. Bet Aleph. Bo is the name of the Parsha. Bo has in it the last 3 of the plagues. The first 7 plagues were in last week's Torah portion. This week's portion has the latter 3 plagues, concluding with Pharaoh finally agreeing that the Jews leave Egypt. As a kid, we always learned the way to remember which plagues were in which Parsha is Bo. How do you spell Bo in Hebrew, Hal? Bet Aleph. What is the numerical value of Bet and Aleph together? 3. The last 3 plagues are in this week. So, and by, the first 7 are last week. The last 3 plagues, locust, darkness, death of the firstborn, are in this week's portion. The name of the Parsha is Bo, come. God begins the Parsha by telling Moshe, come to Pharaoh, Bo el Paro. It's time to warn him for the next plague, page 58, text 1. Jersey, why don't you begin?
God said to Moses, come to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, in order that I may place the signs of mine in his midst.
Come to Pharaoh and give him another warning. Plague number 7 is coming. Why am I doing this? I want to show my wonders in Egypt. The point of the plagues were not just vindictive, but it was educational. It was to show Egypt as well as the Jews about God. It was really to give us our faith until today. So much of the Jewish history is based on the story. So God says it's going to get better. More plagues are coming. Why? I have hardened Pharaoh's heart. I've made Pharaoh stubborn. I made him stubborn. And by making him stubborn, I will be able to increase my plagues. Problem. Do we have a chair? I mean, this is problematic on many, many levels. It sounds like a setup, yes?
There's a fan up, I think should the side open.
Oh, it should be closed. Thank you so much. That would be mine. Thank you, Brian. This is problematic. It almost sounds like God is like framing him. Imagine planting the evidence and then holding charges against him. God makes him stubborn and then punishes him. So this is a problem. And not only is it a problem as far as this story goes, but I think it has broader theological problems. What would that be? What would the broader theological problems be beyond just this story?
Free will.
I mean,
You're,
if God...
you're doing bad. I mean, it's like he's encouraging you to do bad.
Right.
Well, but God didn't give him free will because it
Right.
hardened his
there
heart.
you go.
God didn't.
Right.
God
Took away
didn't
his
say,
free will.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna tempt him to for another plague. He
Right.
made it so he didn't have the will.
Right. And once you say this happens sometimes, where do you draw the line? Do we say, God forbid, when it comes to a criminal?
Yeah, God made me do it.
Exactly. I mean, you've now undone. You've undone one of the central tenets in Jewish faith. That we're in the driver's seat, we have freedom of choice. So this is a dual question. It's a question on this story, but it also, as we see in text 2a, Dennis, the Midrash, we're not the first to ask this question.
I think there's something else about one. And
Come to Pharaoh?
instead of go. So to me, come is that Moses should try to have a relationship with Pharaoh, try to make a last-ditch effort of freeing Pharaoh from
Good.
what is happening.
What Hal is mentioning here is the word in Hebrew, come to Pharaoh, is odd. It should say go to Pharaoh. What is the difference? If I say, hey, Jersey, let's come, let's go, what's the difference? If I say go or come?
Go means away, and come means come towards me.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's basically.
Yeah, come is towards. It also sort of implies God's going with him, I think, if that says go to Pharaoh, but come is there. So there is something about an intimate meeting of minds that he's saying, before you, to really change Pharaoh, first you have to enter into Pharaoh, so to speak. You know, sometimes the way out is first by entering in. So you're right, Hal. There's something about really seeing Pharaoh for who he is, and that will allow eventually the Jews to leave. Okay, but Rabbi Yochanan asks, 2a.
2a, Rabbi Yochanan said, does this not provide heretics with grounds for arguing that he had no means of repenting, since it says, for I have hardened his heart?
All right, so 2,000 years ago, this question was already asked. Rabbi Yochanan, one of the sages in the Talmud, says this is theologically problematic. This is theologically problematic. So what we're going to do today is mention 2 or 3 of the answers you may have heard or may not have heard before about this question, and then give a different kind of answer, a deeper answer. But let's start with the pshat. Let's start with the simple explanations. The first is what I mentioned to you, Liz, on Shabbat, text 2b. Rabbi Yochanan asks this question. He couldn't have repented. And what is the Midrash's answer? So, Brian, 2b.
Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish replied, let the malice of the heretics be stopped up. When God warns a man once, twice, and even a third time, and he still does not repent, then does God close his heart against repentance so that he should extract vengeance from him for his sins? Thus it was with the wicked Pharaoh. Since God sent an envoy to him 5 times, and he took no notice, God then said, you have stiffened your neck and hardened your heart. Well, I will add to your uncleanness.
So this answer is, yeah, God did harden his heart. That was one of the punishments. The punishments to Pare wasn't just the 10 plagues. The punishment to Pare was God took away one of the greatest gifts of being human, i.e., free will. So it is a gift. Free will is not necessarily something natural. It's something God endows in us. It's a divine gift. And he says, you know what? You're so rotten, you're so evil. After 5 times where you didn't take heed of the signs, I'm going to take away that gift. So this is the Midrash's answer. Does that, yeah?
I have a problem with that one. It basically says, hey, this is it. You crossed the line. You can't repent after this. You've gone too far. And that sort of goes against that. There's always the ability to repent and have the teshuva. So that bothers me that there's a red line to cross.
Right.
But how do we ever learn lessons if we don't have repercussions?
Well,
to
there can be
what we did?
repercussions, but
That's pretty extreme.
but when you lose some of your free will,
Yeah.
and then there are subsequent repercussions that your free will could have avoided, that's where I find it problematic. Because he hardened his heart before the plagues were over.
Correct. Halfway through. And indeed, there are places, Marty, where this answer is brought, but Chassidus goes a step deeper. He made it darn hard for him to do teshuvah, but of course what? If he really, really, really wanted, there is always that place and stuff you're able to uncover. So when Chassidus uses this answer, Tanya actually mentions this, it's God made it really, really challenging, hardened his heart as a punishment, but even then we could not say that he had no ability to get out of it.
Okay, so he had some free will. He hardened his heart, but he just made it a little higher hurdle for him.
Correct. So that would be the Hasidic spin on this. Now, the Midrash doesn't write that. The Midrash seems to say
He deserved it.
well, no, Chassidus will all say he deserves it, but from the Midrash itself, it might be a point of no return.
Right.
Chassidus says to say that would be problematic. Rather, what it means is Hashem punished him by making it far more challenging. He would have to work extra hard if he wanted to uncover that godly place inside of him from which to do teshuvah. But not to say that that place didn't exist, Pam. It's that think of we have the exterior side of us, and it was already thick, and it was already stubborn, and God made that more and more and more thick, making it that much harder to access a place of truth inside of him.
Isn't that what happens to some people? A lot of people also, like you have all this darkness.
But here God is doing it. Here the verse says.
How do we know that this is also not happening? I mean, it's not only is it concealing, but sometimes all the shells.
The shtick, yeah, all the it hardens, thickens you.
It doesn't let you see through.
So, yeah. So the first text is this was God's punishment to him, whether it's a point of no return or it's hard for him to do teshuvah. This was a punishment after the 5 times. Someone else said that, yeah.
So where I have a problem isn't necessarily that God is punishing Pharaoh. He's quite deserving.
Yeah.
But that punishment potentially led to there being more plagues than there would have otherwise been, and the relatively innocent Egyptians suffered.
Good question. As I said, we'll mention a few today. Good.
Is God telling Moses in that very beginning, come, help Pharaoh understand. We have put this wall up. Now you have to see you're in a Pharaoh and connect with him to help him.
But doesn't it seem like this was kind of already set in path? I mean, he had already told Moses what was going to happen. So why would he then intervene in the middle? I guess you always have a chance to change.
Correct. And yeah, good question. Any other thoughts before we go further? Okay, so that is the first answer. And Maimonides actually says the exact same thing. Maimonides says similar to the Midrash, perhaps even stronger than what the Midrash says. Pam, text 3. This is the same as the Midrash, but in the words of Maimonides. And notice which section of Maimonides? In the laws of Teshuvah. So in the laws of Teshuvah, Maimonides is saying, guess what? There's some exceptions to the rule. There's some times in history where God made it impossible to do Teshuvah in a sense. Pam?
Okay. For these reasons, it is written in the Torah, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh began to sin on his own initiative and caused hardships to the Israelites who dwelled in his land. And it is stated, come, let us deal wisely with them, as such judgment obligated that he be prevented from repenting, so that he would suffer retribution. Therefore, the Holy One, blessed be he, hardened his heart.
Right, which of course leads to Brian's question. It wasn't just he that suffered retribution, but his people suffered as well.
And the Israelites.
So most commentators say that the Israelites did not have the plagues. The plagues only afflicted the Egyptians.
Sure. But here it says he began to sin on his own initiative and caused hardship to the Israelites who dwelt in his land.
Oh, that's referring to the slavery, not the plagues.
Right, but did it get worse for them?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, he doubled.
Yeah, they had to
Right.
make breaks
Exactly,
without some of the supplies.
Right.
Exactly.
So I mean, even the Israelites are getting
Right, but it was only after the Israelites suffered when Pharaoh hardened his own heart. Later, God hardens his heart, but that point in the story, the Israelites aren't suffering as a result of it. I guess they are here. They're not leaving Egypt because of it, you're saying.
Well, yeah, and the Pharaoh's being nasty to them
Correct.
and making things harder for them as well.
Exactly.
So the
That's
Egyptians are all dealing with the plagues, the Pharaoh's dealing with the plague, and the Pharaoh's being really awful to the slaves.
But it's postponing the Jews' exodus, essentially.
Right. This doesn't feel good.
You don't like this answer? We're going through history and seeing the different answers that were given. I should note that the commentators do say that last year in Egypt, not much work was done. You can imagine. In fact, I forgot which day of the calendar it is. There's a certain day in the calendar, which on this day, the Jews, the slavery essentially stopped. I forgot which day of the calendar it is, but there's a certain...
Think about it. Every month there was a plague.
Yeah,
right?
it was...
So how could,
Exactly. But they were still in Egypt.
Yeah.
That is the first answer given. Maimonides, 1100, the Midrash, 1,000 years earlier. Now let's fast forward a few hundred years. There's an Italian commentator by the name of the Sepharno who gives something very unique. It's sort of like a brain teaser. Oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. Virgil, text 4, the Sepharno.
I'm sorry, you caught me off guard.
Oh, that's fine. Do you want to read text 4? Or?
No, can you put down past this?
Sure, absolutely. So, Jackie, text 4, the second answer. The second answer, page 60.
61.
I'm sorry? Yeah. There is no doubt that if Pharaoh's heart hadn't been hardened by God, he would have sent the Jewish people free. Not out of penitence and subjugation to God, blessed be he, but because he would have been unable to bear the agony of the plagues any longer. As his servant said to him, "Do you not yet know that Egypt is lost?" Such a move would not have been repentance at all. If Pharaoh would have wanted to really submit himself to God and return with complete repentance, nothing would have stopped him. This is the meaning of "I will harden Pharaoh's heart," so that he would be able to withstand the plagues and not send the Jewish people out of fear. The purpose of this was so that God could display his signs in Egypt, that Egypt recognize his goodness and do true repentance.
Anyone catch that?
Yes, I want to know.
God had to overcompensate, turn the steering wheel the other way. The goal was that Pharaoh on his own should do teshuvah. And we know that a type of teshuvah that is just motivated out of fear of your backside is not a genuine teshuvah. So God gave him thicker skin to have freedom of choice. The hardening of the heart didn't remove freedom of choice. The hardening of the heart put him back in the driver's seat to allow him to have freedom of choice, that it wasn't a no-brainer to let the Jews go. Again, this is thoughts on that?
Well, I do.
Yes.
A
yes,
lot of
yes.
thoughts.
I was thinking, if I have this straight, that Pharaoh would not have prayed to the Hebrew God. So why would he have really cared to do what the Hebrew God would have wanted him to do?
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, before the story even starts, he says, "I've never heard of this Hebrew God." Part of the purpose of the plagues was to educate him. So by this time, by this point in the story, he's already cognizant of the fact that there is one God, not multiple gods.
He accepted that?
He's supposed to. That was the goal. We had one text after the plague, and we mentioned it on Shabbat.
Well,
What were you going to say, Dennis?
It's all in God's plan then.
well, I thought
Right,
it's certainly
right.
the case that God made a convincing argument to Pharaoh that he was a powerful God. I don't know about the argument that he was the only God.
Correct.
And a polytheist like Pharaoh was would get that pretty easily.
Yeah. We mentioned on Shabbat that it was after the 7th plague that we see something unusual from Pharaoh, and we'll just do this briefly. At the end of last week's Torah portion, he writes, after the plague of hail, which was unique in its effect on him, he writes as follows. Pharaoh quickly summoned Moshe and Aaron This time I have sinned. God is the righteous one, and me and my people are wicked. That was unique. The first 6 times, he basically just says, all right, I'll let them go because he wants the plague to stop. And then he changes his mind. After the 7th time, he actually says, chatasi. It's like a Yom Kippur word. I have sinned. It didn't last. So he's slowly coming to something, but that doesn't
that's in
last.
Torah, not Midrash.
That's Torah.
But that's more problematic. If he was already on the way, why did God have to harden his heart further when he was already softening?
And my question is, how could the people have found the goodness of God if they're seeing all this horror? Where would the goodness come from?
So why couldn't there have been a better way? Why did God have to punish the Egyptians?
Maybe punish the Pharaoh, but show signs and wonders and awe to the Egyptians.
So there's an interesting article on Chabad.org called "Why Did God Have to Punish the Wicked? Isn't There a Better Way?" If we have time, maybe I'll bring it up at the end of class. But it's a different discussion, Anne. It's a good question.
But the Egyptians weren't all that blameless. They were making just
Absolutely.
as difficult a life for the.
They took pleasure in making the Jews' lives. Most of them did.
Rich, right? What about the poor Egyptians? Of course, they don't ever bring them up in history.
Right.
Those were the slaves.
Yeah. All right. So we have 2 answers. Liz. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious also, like, if God doesn't want Pharaoh's decisions to be motivated by fear, why do the plagues continue to escalate until finally it's the death of these boys?
Right.
Like, that's pretty fear-inducing.
That's good. Yeah. So, what we're saying is, God put these fearful plagues, but then harden his heart. Why not? If the goal wasn't fear, why not find another way of doing it? Yeah. Good question. So these are 2 of the answers that were given. And most other answers have to do with one of these 2. Let's now see if there's another way of doing this. Before we do so, any of your own thoughts on how to understand this? Because I think psychologically, we don't have to go, I think we can sort of get this.
Well,
Psychologically, what were you going to say, Barbara?
I was thinking of perseverance and, when things get tough, the tough get going, that kind of attitude. I'm not going to let him do that to me or whoever's going to do it.
Right. It's a psychological condition, meaning that why do we, unfortunately, we know of people today where through a series of negative actions, what happens?
Something great.
They essentially lose part of their freedom. Or at least it makes it really hard for them to get out of that. What do we call that?
Addiction.
We call that addiction. So it can be substance, it can be habits, it can also be something as simple as, when a kid says a lie, it makes it much harder afterwards to say the truth the second time because you've already dug yourself in something, right?
Or president.
How much more so if it's an organization? Because at the organizational level, I'm going together, I would get build up. Jonathan Sachs points this out. On an individual level, it's one thing. On an organizational level, now there's a cover up. Now we have to get other people involved in this, right? Enron, one of these kinds of stories. It's hard to get out of that Ponzi scheme. How much more so on a national level? So the decisions we make, we look at freedom of choice as we have it or we do not. It's not really that black and white, right? Bad decisions we all make impairs our ability to be free in that area. And that's what an addict is. That's what stubbornness is. It closes us off. And we need a lot of times outside help in order to be able to access a place of freedom inside of us. Any thoughts about that? I mean, that's what an addict is. Is an addict free?
No.
I have another thing.
Yeah.
Which is separate from the punishment side to Pharaoh. The Jews had been in Egypt for 300 some odd years.
200 something.
Okay, a long time.
Yeah.
And I bet had pretty much forgotten their Judaism and
Correct.
forgotten their awe of God.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think that it was only punishment to the Egyptians. I think this is also a reacquaintance with their deity in a way that needed to, break free from the environment.
Very good. And yeah, the commentators do say that the plagues had a dual purpose. It was just as much for educating the Jews as it was for punishing them. That's true. That is absolutely true. Yes.
Doesn't that also have to do with?
So prolonging it would help, you're saying. By prolonging this experience, it helps the Jews. Yeah.
Because both the Jews and the Egyptians, if they didn't put the blood on the lentil, they suffered.
That was Jews. Only the Jews were instructed to do that.
But the Jews that did not,
Were
that's what I'm saying.
So all of these
that's
plagues.
the nature of
That separation, so they would.
the terrible thing that came
Yeah,
through at night.
yeah. True as well. Yes.
I feel like we also talked at shul about like not letting that one bad decision be the thing that colors your perception of that person.
Yeah.
And is that also, can you bring that back a little?
Well, that's a healthy person. A healthy person, last week we spoke about this, a healthy person has the ability, right, to always have their mind rule their heart. And just because we spoke last week, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, about gratitude, even when the same person has also done some negativity. I think it was 2 weeks ago, class. And the ability to, to choose to be nice to a person, be grateful for the good, despite the fact that they've done some bad to you as well. But that requires a tremendous amount of freedom. It requires you to be living from a very healthy place inside of you, to be able to see the good and not be colored by the bad. So it's Pharaoh, we're saying, is someone who was so closed off from that ability. This is my wife. Give me a second. Sometimes it's hi. Okay. 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 Thank you so much. She knows in a class, and it was a voice. It was a voicemail. The plan was to leave a voicemail. Sorry. So Pharaoh lost that place inside of him. How? Because through God, through who? Through his own actions. His own stubbornness made him an addict, and God allowed him to go in the direction that he wanted to go. But let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's do a few more. His God, he was an addict.
Of power.
Of power, of ego.
Of ego.
Of, as we will continue. Page 62. Let's take a step back and identify what it means to be able to choose. What does it mean to be able to choose? As I mentioned, freedom of choice is a gift. God tells us in text 5a. Any comments from the online community, Amnon?
Not at present.
Okay. Debbie, I hope you're listening.
Debbie is listening.
Okay. Let's take a step back from the two answers we have and talk a little bit about choice and what choice means. 5a.
Behold, I have set before you today life and good and death and evil.
Where's this from? This is from Deuteronomy, the end of the Torah, where Moshe tells the Jews about, the next words are choose life. But I've placed both in front of you. One is chaim, it's life and good. One is death and bad. And the meaning here is that what is good is essentially alive, and what is evil is essentially dead. Even if right now it is alive, it's not plugged into the source of life, so therefore it is going to die. And then a little bit further in Deuteronomy, verse 19.
This day I call upon the heaven and the earth as witness that I've warned you. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. You shall choose life, so that you and your offspring will live.
Okay, so freedom of choice. This is the source, by the way, of freedom of choice in the Torah. These verses, where God says, "I'm not making it obvious. All I'm doing is placing both in front of you, but you have to choose, and that's what makes good meaningful. We choose it." There's an old story, like Jews would say back in Russia. Two peasants were talking, and one says, "Why does the Tsar have to tax us so much? All the rubles anyways are made in his palace. If he wants the rubles, he should just keep them in the first place." So the other one answers, he doesn't want his rubles, he wants our rubles, you know. So similarly, God doesn't want his good, he wants it to be real good. He wants it to be our good. And it's only our good if we have two equal or two options in front of us. Yes.
Of course, so you don't choose life, your offspring are going to suffer as a result of it, it's basically saying. Isn't that what it's saying?
Well, you can imagine going into slavery.
Well, in biblical times, Marty, that was often the case. I mean, in biblical times, when the Jews did what was right, they were rewarded. And when they did what was bad, they were punished. But even beyond biblical times, you could read this verse as, if you want to live a good life, if you want to live a spiritual, whole, full life, this is the path. This will allow you and your offspring to really live. Okay, so I'm adding in a word, yeah.
Yeah, but it's supposedly the doing a mitzvah, the reward is the mitzvah, but here it's saying, do this and I'm going to give you something, I'm going to do something. So the reward isn't choose life because that's the right thing to do, it's choose life so I have trouble with that it's really, a quid pro quo sort of, not because
Correct.
It's the right thing to do.
And that's a question we can have throughout the Torah. Why does God promise rewards? If we should do what's good.
The whole
Yeah, it's in the Shema,
the
too.
whole Shema
Yeah.
is all.
I have
it's
problems
So-
with that paragraph too in the Shema, yeah.
So
Talk
let me
about that.
just, it's a good question. I'll give a short answer. One answer is that the Torah speaks to everyone, no matter what their spiritual level is. And although ideally one should be on the level in which they are doing good because it is good, the Torah also addresses those people who are still on the more childish level. Like we know, I have children, and when children are young, what do? If you do this, then you'll get your candy, right? Or whatever the case is. So God addresses on the lower level as well to be able to address the more simplistic minded. The deeper level, I would say, Marty, is not that the reward is the brownie, not that if you do good, you get this, but a life in sync with truth will automatically bring brachos to you. You see, not in a way where, you see the difference? It's like, you did good, all right, I want to give you some tickets. No. When you live a life in sync with what is spiritually true, it will automatically bring about good in every single area. Because what I believe is spiritually true should also be, what I believe is spiritually good should also translate into physically good, right? So not looking at it as disconnected, you did good, therefore you get this, but you did good, and what is good will be good in every way. That's the way the world is meant to be. I don't want to have too much of a discussion on that. Yeah.
Well, just because the text says you can choose good and life or death and evil. So the reward sounds like it's a continued life. And if you make bad choices, the result will be death.
Right. But one could also read the death as unplugged.
Spiritual.
Yeah, exactly. Unplugged with that, which is true. Yes, Hal. And
Two rational, what appear to be good people are facing a dilemma or something.
Mhm.
And one says, this is the way to do it. The other one says, no, this is the way to do it. History might say that the choice that was made turned out to be a very bad choice and led to bad things down the road.
Sure.
So even if you have free will, attempting to do good, you could
still make mistakes.
do.
Irreparable damage.
Of course.
I don't want to say
Yeah.
evil, just negative. You know,
That's-
and only history says what that
Yeah,
was, and then history is written by the winner, so it gets even.
And I think I've mentioned in a previous class, it's interesting in Leviticus where the Torah discusses accidental sins. So it says, if your Kohen Gadol will make a mistake, the high priest, he should do this. He says, if you make a mistake, you should do this. There's a lot of ifs. When it comes to the political leader, it says when. Why? Because when it comes to many issues, with the country, with politics, sometimes you don't, you might do the best you can, and you're still doing what is wrong. There's a when there. So, all right, let's go back over here. So Torah says that we have freedom of choice, two options in front of us. Now, we have freedom of choice. However, on a very simple level, there's a green apple and a red apple, and I choose which one to take. In order for me to know which one, in order for me to have choice, I first have to know The one is green and one is red. If I'm colorblind,
Oh.
I don't have much
You don't
choice.
have any choice.
Choice, what comes before choice is what?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. Knowledge comes before choice. Knowledge comes before choice. And this idea now we're going to develop comes from a Hasidic sage who lived in the 1700s. He's a student of the Baal Shem Tov. He lived in Chernobyl. I know today Chernobyl is known for for not good things, but there was actually a Hasidic dynasty, the Chernobyler Rebbe, and there was a whole dynasty out of Chernobyl. Their last name is Tursky. Some of you may have heard of some. There's a Dr. Rabbi Tursky today who's a famous doctor and psychiatrist from that same dynasty. He deals with addiction. Rabbi Tab, who was here before, got a lot of his knowledge from Rabbi Tursky. In any event, so this is the original Rabbi Tursky in the 1700s from Chernobyl, and he writes as follows. Liz, please.
True free choice is as described in the verse, "Behold, I have set before you today life and good, and you shall choose life." How can a person choose the good from the bad without knowledge? Only when a person has the knowledge to distinguish between good and bad can he choose the good and reject the bad.
Okay, so we must know what is good and what is bad. Then we choose. Before Moses tells us to choose good, the rest of Deuteronomy is what? Moshe defining what good is, right? And then once you know, then you can choose. Those that took our last JLI know that the word in Hebrew for knowing something is what? What is the word in Hebrew to know something? Not just to learn it, not just to study it, but to know it. The word in Hebrew is da'at. Da'at. Da'at means to know. And da'at is an important word. Da'at is different than the stage of understanding something, okay? We'll just do the 60-second version of this idea. We're at a class today. We're all hearing new information. The first moment where you hear a new idea, let's say you heard that idea about freedom, about God having to harden his heart in order that he have freedom of choice. New idea. That first stage where a new flash comes is called what in Hebrew? Chachma. Chachma means the flash, the idea, the light bulb. At the point of Chachma, you're not able to even explain it to other people very well. It's still settling inside of you. Creative people are blessed with a lot of Chachma. The mind is going, creativity. The next step is internalizing, thinking it over, details, explanations, metaphors. A good teacher is blessed with the ability to have Bina. Women, it says, have an additional Bina over men. Bina is the second stage. Chachma, Bina, the third stage is Da'at. Bina, you understand it very well, but you still don't know it. What does know mean? Text 7. What is the first time in Torah we have the word know?
Da'at means knowledge, as in the verse, and Adam knew Eve, which implies attachment and union.
Remember the biblical knowing? Why is yada? Yeah.
Actually, my question is da'at used in other than this sexual union idea?
Yeah, later in Torah it's used for knowledge. Yeah. By the way, Chachma Bina and Da'at is the acronym for Chabad. That is what Chabad stands for. Chachma Bina Da'at. The percentage of people that go to Chabad that don't know that is very high. I know.
Thank you for sharing that.
I know that. It's because Da'at is what, I'll speak for myself. In that last JLI, I thought about this idea a lot. Too much we focus on Chachma and Bina and not Da'at. Today's generation has access to information more than ever before. We should be so much better at getting things done, so much better at making the right decisions. What used to take hours of research at the library, and now is, right? I mean, and yet, it doesn't always click. We don't always see the results because information is one thing, even explaining it. Da'at means it is real to you. Da'at means the idea and you are married. Just the same way Adam and Chava, Adam knew Eve intimately. As long as the idea and you are separate, it doesn't mean anything to you. The example given would be someone that goes to the doctor and the doctor says, I have bad news to share you. Unless you quit smoking, there's a 60% chance, God forbid, that you will, develop lung cancer. I don't know. Okay. Shows them the chart, shows them the x-ray. Do you understand it? Yes. Sure. Walks out and? What happened? He understood it so well. What happened?
He didn't marry.
He didn't marry. The idea and him weren't married. We can be at a class, it's very inspirational, but it doesn't hit us. That is, I would say, takes experiencing. There are a lot of times you'll meet someone whose opinion about something changes only after they live it, experience it, knew someone that has it. All of a sudden, everything is different. Someone in the family's dealing with it. Oh, now my opinion changes about it. Why? What changes?
Emotional connection.
Oh, so yeah, and that's why in Chassidus, dat is the bridge between intellect and emotion.
But exactly. In the Sephiroth, it's hidden.
What is it?
It's
hidden. It's the hidden Sephiroth.
But it is dat is the middle one that connects. Those of you that were at Hannah's class last week, or the art thing.
That's fun.
She spoke a lot about what dat is to the mind. She spoke what tiferet is in the emotions. What is different about tiferet? What tiferet allows you to marry the other person, connect with the other person. You're not just giving, you're feeling compassion. Where does compassion happen? Because you really identify with the other person. So that is what dat is. Let's do some of these texts inside. This is a deep mystical text, page 65. Read it to yourself because of time.
Which text is it?
This is text 10a. 10a. 10. For the people listening online, we have to read at least the beginning out loud. And
that is all about really feeling an idea, namely that the idea is truly grasped. It is entirely possible that one can understand an idea very well, yet does not feel it or appreciate it at all. For example, a child under the age of 13 is not punishable by Jewish law. The child may be very sharp and have a good handle on the information, very well versed in the negative commandments and their consequences, and still he cannot be punished for transgression.
Hold it there. It's interesting. Dat is an intellectual maturity. That's why bar and bat mitzvah happens. It's kids, even if they understand it, there's a missing link, right? Don't touch the fire, it hurts you, and yet they touch it. Why? They're missing dat. Dat kicks in at a certain age. All right, how does this relate to what we're saying here? And I'll have to, because of time, finish here. Text 10b. Please, Barbara.
Likewise, to be able to have proper appreciation of the matter in order to be able to choose good and reject evil, a person must possess that. With intellect alone, a person may objectively understand what's good and what's evil, but value them equally. But he doesn't really appreciate the benefit of good and the drawbacks of bad. Only one with that, who feels the difference, will choose only good, etc. This is what is all about, real appreciation and feeling.
So you have many addicts that unfortunately it doesn't kick in. They don't get how they are destroying, God forbid, their lives until sometimes what they call hitting
rock bottom.
And then there's this moment. They hit rock bottom, then there's this moment of dat. Up until that point, it doesn't hit them. So dat is the ability to truly connect with an idea, to go outside the way you look at it and connect with the idea for what it is. Who cannot have dat? Child cannot, or an adult that's like a child. An adult that is like a child is unable to have dat. And it's interesting, later in the Tanakh, some of the Haftorahs, not the 5 books of Moses, when it talks about who Pharaoh is, because of time I'll paraphrase this, look at text 11a. Go tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, who's the crocodile that lies down in the river and says, the river is mine and I made it myself. Who is Pharaoh? He thinks he is a god. Pharaoh is everything. Pharaoh can't be wrong. Pharaoh made it all. Someone in that condition is unable to have da'at. They're unable to have da'at, okay? The good and bad doesn't hit them because they are living in their reality, in their world. So the understanding here was not that God took away Pharaoh's freedom of choice. Pharaoh didn't have the da'at necessary to choose between good and bad. Yes, God hardened his heart. But the hardening of the heart was not what took away his choice. His inability to go outside of himself is what did it himself.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Debbie has a comment here. She says, how to maintain that? Because we may be motivated to change our behavior for the good, but that can fade when time passes and situation changes. Like that person who stopped smoking, but then starts again much later after they are improved. Just like God constantly maintains the world, we must constantly maintain our connection to Him. Takes great strength. Will that love.
Well said, Debbie. Da'at, unlike Chachma and Bina, doesn't stay with you, right? Once you know something, you usually remember it. In order to maintain da'at, you almost like need a mantra. You always, da'at takes repetition. Da'at takes every single day reflecting on why you're doing something. Da'at will always need you to relive it and re-experience it. So it takes time. That's why today, even though we have so much information, people don't have patience. Da'at takes patience. It's easy to know something. Da'at doesn't happen by reading a book. It happens when you take the walk alone and it hits you. Da'at takes personalizing the idea. Da'at takes repetition. So yeah, Debbie, there's a lot of, we can have another class how to maintain da'at, but you're absolutely correct. We're absolutely correct. Da'at takes repetition. But going back to Pharaoh, the Rabbi Tursky of Chernobyl finishes off in text 12. During the period of exile in Egypt, da'at was exiled. There was no da'at. It turns out that Pharaoh's free choice wasn't taken away. He really didn't have it to begin with. Part of the liberation was achieving this. And that's who Pharaoh was, a big child, a stubborn person closed off to real people, real feelings, real experiences, unable to see good and bad because he was closed off. And the lesson for us in our own lives, thank God we're not Pharaohs. Thank God our problems are much smaller, but there are times where when we find ourselves frustrated by, I know what's right, how come I can't be making the right decision? Stuck between a rock and a hard place, sometimes we need a wider perspective. Sometimes we're locked into the way of seeing things a certain way, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a fresh perspective. They talk about the difference between solving problems horizontally and vertically. Sometimes when you can't get over it, what do you need to do? Just widen the lens a little bit. Widen the lens. Go around. See things in a bigger way. Torah helps us do that. A mentor helps us do that. But we're up against it. We don't have choice. Take a step back. Have a bigger vision. So we'll hold it there. We'll hold it with this idea. A third answer of Pharaoh, by his stubbornness alone, didn't have the capacity to choose. Likely due to the bad decisions he had made over a period of time, making it worse and worse. And in our own lives as well, when we see ourselves making decisions we know aren't right for us, and I do it, we all do it, and we can't get out of it, it means we have to take a step back and develop more of a da'at towards that idea. We'll hold it here. Thank you, Nissan Communications, for streaming this. We will be back here, God willing, next week.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.